Welcome to World Affairs Today, brought to you by the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C., a leading forum for global education and international affairs.
Good evening and welcome to the World Affairs Council World Affairs Today conversation from the field. I'm Heidi Shoup, President of the Council, and it's my privilege to welcome you here this evening. Tonight the Council turns again to Afghanistan, and events there is the subject of our discussion. Specifically, we will be hearing from someone who has focused her efforts on helping young Afghans through education, a subject near and dear to the World Affairs Council's hearts. Hassina Sherjan is the founder and chief executive of Aid Afghanistan for Education and owner of the Baomi Company, an internationally recognized home accessory business. Hassina was born and raised in Afghanistan. When the Russians invaded her country, she, then 19, left with her siblings and parents. After a couple of years in India and Germany, the family settled in Seattle, Washington. She returned to Afghanistan 23 years later, when Hamid Karzai became president in December of 2001. She founded Aid Afghanistan for Education, an organization that educates over 3,000 children across 9 Afghan provinces. She has also started the retail business, which makes placemats, coasters, pillowcases, curtains, and other textile items. Baomi employs Afghan men and women and uses only Afghan textiles. The mission is to create jobs in Afghanistan, especially for women, based on traditional Afghani designs and using only locally grown cotton. Baomi's profit is in part provide funding for Aid Afghanistan for Education. Hassina received a Master of Public Administration from Harvard Kennedy School and an honorary doctorate of law from Queen's University in Canada. She is a co-author of Toughing It Out in Afghanistan with Michael O'Hanlon, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, himself a guest on this stage only a few months ago. She has had to confront challenges on all fronts, domestically and internationally, and tonight she will share some of her experiences and observations with us. She is joined on the stage by Ron Neumann. Ambassador Neumann is no stranger to the Council members and guests. We have had the honor of hosting him on several occasions during the past few years for various discussions focused on U.S. efforts in Afghanistan, including our program with Dr. Abdullah, and of course, when he published his award-winning account of U.S. involvement in Afghanistan, The Other War, Winning and Losing in Afghanistan, in 2007. After serving in the Army in Vietnam, Ambassador Neumann joined the Foreign Service in 1970 and quickly rose through the ranks as a Middle East area specialist. His assignments included posts in Iran, Yemen, Abu Dhabi, Senegal, Director of the Iran-Iraq Office, Ambassador to Algeria, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs, Ambassador to Bahrain, and finally Ambassador to Afghanistan in 2005, a post he held until 2007. He is currently president of the American Academy for Diplomacy, a Washington-based think tank, where he focuses his efforts to expand state and USAID's personnel to carry out their responsibilities. He will pose some questions and moderate the Q&A session. Please join me in welcoming Hassina Sherjan and Ambassador Ron Neumann.
Well, Hassina, it's great to see you here again in Washington, having seen you so often in Kabul, where you were very gracious to me during my time and visits since. And before we go on to talk about the work of Baomi particularly, this is a time, as you know, in America where many people doubt that the United States should continue its commitment to Afghanistan. There was an article in the New York Times just a few days ago that said, let's just forget it all and get out as quickly as we can. And people like you who are going to live in the consequences of that kind of thinking, I thought it would make sense to ask you, somebody living there on the ground and working hard, is this really impossible? Afghanistan's just hopeless? That certainly is not the image of your school. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk to that question a little before we go on to Bhumi.
Thank you. Great to see you here again. And great to see everybody. Thanks for having me and having us here. Afghanistan, I think what I see is that the actual work of rebuilding the country has not begun yet. 10 years later, and billions of dollars spent, we can leave quickly, and that's the shortcut. That's the easy way out. It's like marriages, you know. It's a lot of work, but if you don't want to work, I mean, the easiest thing is to leave. I think leaving is easier, but it has its consequences, which we have witnessed before. And yet, Afghanistan can be not only a breeding ground for insurgents and Taliban, but it could also be a breeding ground for many positive actions that can take place in Afghanistan. I think we can test anything that we want in Afghanistan. I think leaving may not be the best solution, but rather than looking at how can we make a difference, and how can we build a country that will, of course, that all depends on, it's on the shoulders of the Afghans rather than the internationals, which so far Afghans have not really taken ownership of what's going on in Afghanistan. So I think the most difficult work is how to give this work back to the Afghans. We really didn't have the opportunity or the time to realize what has been the main issues and problems that we have, and how to come up with a solution of our own. So solutions have always been given to us, and I think that kind of solutions never really have a result.
I think this is, a really important question, because everybody is talking now about handing off responsibility to Afghans, whether it's in security or the country as a whole. How do we responsibly turn responsibility over to Afghans, not just throw up our hands and leave?
But again, you cannot give responsibility of something that's not their idea.
Yeah.
I can't give my own idea and concept and program to somebody else and say, here, take care of it from now on. Unless it's their idea and it's homegrown, I think it's going to be impossible. I don't think that this is handing over thing is the solution. I mean, even handing over the military. This was a military that was developed based on an American model. We need a model that works for Afghanistan. And I'm not really sure if this is the best model for us. We need a model that is more closer to our neighborhood, like an Indian model. So that's, of course, it's not going to be sustainable here. Afghanistan will never, ever have the money to pay its military.
So how do we end up
I think it's still
positive?
Not too late to consult with the Afghans. Programs should be always inclusive. If there's going to be programs and projects, it has to be designed with the consultant of the Afghans. In fact, I think the aid money should not even be given to Afghanistan unless it's asked for. So it has to be based on needs. I have to tell you a story of something that just happened last week. I had a call from a finance company saying that we received money from the U.S. Embassy, and your business name, Bhumi, is on the list of the 25 companies that we're going to help, and we want to have a meeting with you. So I said, great, so come and let's have a meeting. So they came over and...
This was the finance ministry?
No, this was a finance company.
A company?
These are finance companies, they do all sorts of financial assistance to private sector. So they came over and I said, so what are you going to do for us? And he said, we are going to help you file your taxes and renew your license. And that's what we're going to do for 25 companies. So that's very nice, but our taxes are already paid and our license is already renewed. We do that every year. And they said, well, that's very surprising because most companies don't. So why, I mean, we were never asked what we need. If we even, so somebody made a nice proposal and the money was given. So this is just an example of what's the rest of the aid money doing. The Ministry of Higher Education has 12 strategies because these consultants come in and they have no idea what they're doing. So they start writing another strategy. And so the strategies are just piled up and nobody never reads it, of course. So, because having a strategy is really, it's not the way Afghans operate. And you know very well how Afghans operate, but it's not based on business plans and strategies.
No.
So
It's a little more complicated. But as we talked to the U.S. taxpayers after the election,
well,
a certain number of people are going to say, yes, we should pay attention and do it right. Other people are going to say, it's just not worth it. Let's just stop. And so I think there's this
I think for the taxpayers, it surprises me to see that how passive U.S. taxpayers are when it comes to their money being spent internationally. Of course, they get frustrated when they see the changes are not happening, but yet militarily, U.S. is very much involved, and many Americans have died, but no changes have come about. And their solution is always, okay, well, let's pull out of Afghanistan, come back home. We don't want to have anything to do with Afghanistan anymore. Is that that's the easy solution.
Yeah, but that's
the real solution is always difficult, yeah?
But that's the solution a lot of people are looking at.
But why are they not looking at a solution where they can control and monitor and have a say about how their tax money is being spent?
No, I agree, but you know that I'm not an unbiased witness. But my question to you is, what would you tell them about why it's still possible to have something else?
I think it's still possible, but there has to be changes in mindset of not only the American public, but also an Afghan public. Yeah, I mean, Afghans have to take responsibility and step up and say, okay, well, this is what we need. And then for the U.S. population, they really have to be more active and understanding, reading, knowing where things are. I mean, now we are so involved globally that we can't just live in isolation and assume that, okay, we have a nice, happy life here. No. Do we want another September 11? That's exactly what's going to happen if we pull out. So I think the most important thing never really happened in the last 10 years, and that is really to develop a people-to-people relationship, which is the most important thing. I don't think that we should really leave it to the governments to solve the world problems, because they have their own internal problems so much that they don't really have time to solve the world problem. So how can we develop this people-to-people relationship to make sure that changes will come about, because that's the only way that Afghan population will learn about American life and what's important for them and what their values are. And that's the only way that Americans learn about Afghanistan and what their values are and how they want to live. What do they really need? And once they understand that, what do they really need, then it's easy to say, okay, well, I don't want my tax money to be spent for this and that. Because people need education. How can we bring any sort of change without a population that's educated? We've had 10 or 11% literacy in Afghanistan for a very long time. And even in the last 10 years, yes, we may have millions of students coming to school, but that doesn't mean they're learning anything. We need a serious reform of the whole education system. And we need to work with people to model different types of education system and test it and see what works best. Because there's still a lot of memorizations going on in Afghan schools. So thinking doesn't take place. And learning doesn't take place. So to do all of this, I think it's very crucial that we all work together and not really leave it all to the government.
Well, you've done a lot. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about how you began and how you've gotten to, 3,000 students now, all these schools? I mean, what was the process of growing this system?
You know, I believe that if you really have a passion and you identify a problem in the society and you go after it, it all kind of happens. Honestly, I never planned anything. I did not write a business plan. And I went back to Afghanistan in 1999 for the first time to see for myself, because it was really hard for me to believe that girls couldn't go to school and women couldn't work anymore, and had to see this. So I'm so glad I did. Ended up establishing 5 clandestine schools for 250 girls and left in 2 weeks.
Clandestine, secret schools.
They're totally secret. Well, I thought it was secret, but then the Taliban, of course, found out, and they beat up the kids and they beat up the teachers. But they continue coming. So I think after that, I always wished that I would be able to go back and help people, because it was so obvious that these little kids were running around and looking where to go to school. And there was nothing for them. And I thought, it was very strange, because when I went to school, I couldn't wait for a day to be a holiday or an excuse or a teacher not showing up so we could go play. And these kids were totally the opposite. They were sitting there in classroom without a teacher, with their books in their hands, waiting for a teacher to show up. And there were no teachers to show up, because 70% of the teachers in Afghanistan were always women, and those women were not allowed to teach anymore. So, and then September 11 happened, and the very first thing that came to my mind was that, wow, I can go home and help educate people. So I did go back home, and then I started going around and talking to teachers and principals and visiting schools to see what is the need now. Because now they're saying, okay, well, everybody can come back to school. And that's the job of the government. So I realized that these 17-year-olds were sitting on 3rd grade. And when I asked them how old they were too embarrassed to say. But obviously they were much taller than everybody else. So it took some time, when talking to the minister, and who continued to say that we have literacy programs. But this was not literacy programs. These girls wanted to go through their high school and go to university and beyond that. So it took some time, but we finally, even the donors was difficult to convince. So finally the Danish government, the Danish ambassador was the one that said, yes, I will do it. So within the first year, we established 3 schools in Kabul with 1,100 students and $127,000. And at the end of the year, I had 20,000 left. So when I went back to the embassy to say I have 20,000
You're obviously not a
left,
contractor. Contractors never have money left.
I know, they were so surprised. I said, I have 20,000 left. And she couldn't believe it. She said, no, just spend it. I mean, Scandinavians are very easy to work with. They said, okay, we'll just use it, and then we'll continue the next year from whenever you finish this money. And what that 127,000, 1,100 students, we renovated buildings, we paid teachers, we bought books and stationery and everything else, and plus uniforms and backpacks and everything. So you don't need a lot of money to do this kind of work. We don't need billions of dollars. And then after that, the Kabul schools were running, and it was very successful. Teachers were loving it, and the young ladies were very happy to be there. And then we started looking at how to expand to the provinces. So slowly everybody paid attention to accelerated education programs and this and that. And many of those programs, of course, closed because they were only for 2 years. And we continued to convince the donor that these girls will not go back to formal education because they were too old, and there was too much pressure on getting married, and they said that if you close this down, our parents will not allow us to go. So anyhow, we managed to continue with the Danish government for 4 years, and then after that, USAID stepped up. By then, we already had 3,000 students, female students, and we have now 104 male students. So that's really, it was never planned. We just kind of sat down and talked about it and picked provinces where we should go. And I usually pick places I had never been before so that I can see the rest of the country. And it's very exciting because I just came back from Badakhshan province, which is way up. The school is way up in the mountain, very far away.
For those of you that are not sitting with a mental map of Afghanistan firmly clutched in your mind, if Afghanistan is here and the little panhandle going out to China is here, we're talking about.
Yeah, it's very close to the Chinese border, and there is a village called Hosh, which is way up in the mountain, and nobody goes there. So I just came back from there, and we had our first graduation. 44 students graduated, and it's quite fascinating because one of them said that she had gotten married and had kids, and she always wanted to finish her high school. I mean, having a high school degree is a very big deal. So she convinced her husband to move back to this village where we have a school so she can finish her high school. And now she wants to be in the parliament. She said, I think we don't have a representative in the parliament from Hosh, and I think I should do that. And I'm pretty sure that she will do that. So I think life is very...
What you make of it. Yeah.
Exciting in Afghanistan, and also it's it has meaning because when you know that you can make a difference in a total stranger's life. And a student came up to me and said, if it wasn't for these programs, I could never write my name. Then you know that
you've made a difference.
It's worth, life is worth living,
Well, let me give a chance for people in the audience.
I'm so thankful you're here because I've had this question on my mind for about 5 years.
Oh, no.
You made the statement that you can't get the Afghan people to be responsible for what's not theirs, and you used the term homegrown. Now, my question about Afghanistan, and I've read many things on it, and I can't quite get it straight. There appears to be several cultural groups that make up the country. My question is the Taliban a different cultural group than, let's say, Karzai and the people in Kabul are, or are they actually the same people? Homegrown. Where do we get home?
Home. We have to first identify what home is. Okay, no, the Taliban are, Talib means student, as you know, and they're mostly trained in Pakistan. It was never really part of the Afghan culture. We had very few madrasas in Afghanistan. The education system in Afghanistan has always been secular. Afghanistan was always a secular nation. The Taliban have been trained in madrasas in Pakistan. That's where their home is. And now there are some Afghans within the Taliban as the Pakistanis, but they are living mostly on the other side of the border. Or they may have some families on this side of the border, but it's mostly on the south. And they were living in Afghanistan. They were living in Pakistan, and that's where they were trained. So they're not. They're really not a cultural group, and they don't really. If you talk to the Taliban, they never talk about being Afghan or Pakistani or being from a place. They believe in the ideology, and their goal is to fight for that ideology and their own interpretation of the Quran. And they believe that life starts after this. Here they have a specific task, and that's to convert as many people as they can to their own version of Islam. And then life starts after. So this is how they train these very young boys to become suicide bombers. Because they brainwash them, understanding that life starts after. So once you blow yourself up, that's where the real life starts.
It is noticeable that in all the years of the war, first against the Afghan communists, then against the Soviets, then between the various resistance groups, there were no suicide bombers.
No, this is not an Afghan concept at all.
Yeah, it's an importation. It's now, unfortunately, got to be a somewhat popular importation.
I think the main issue is that nation building is not a project, it's a process. So we need time. And in Afghanistan, unfortunately, we didn't target the actual problems, which are, insurgents coming from Pakistan. We did not target them. So I would like to have His Excellency's opinion on that, how and why, and how we can solve that problem of insurgents coming to Afghanistan.
I guess that's my question. The problem all along has been that we cannot wage war without Pakistan's help, because Afghanistan is a landlocked country, and we cannot win the war without a cooperation we have not had in the sanctuaries. I don't have a simple answer. It took the American government quite a while to decide how much was intention and how much was lack of control. There's now a lot of pressure on Pakistan. As you know, the immediate result of the pressure when I say we, I'm not in the government anymore, but when the Americans attacked and killed Osama bin Laden, the initial reaction of the Pakistanis was to close all after that, and then after we unfortunately killed a number of their soldiers in an air raid, we ended up with the border closed. Now we've been able to move a lot of our supplies and equipment in from the north. Point is, it's not an either-or situation. I know a great many Afghans believe that if we just pushed the Pakistanis hard enough, they would shut it down. I wish that were true. I don't think it is. I think we have to push harder, as we have pushed harder in the last year, but I don't think it can be a simple question. If we would just put enough pressure on, it would all stop. I think we have to put pressure on, we have to put reward on, but we also are condemned to work with Pakistan as well. And that makes for very complicated diplomacy. Do you want to add? Do you want to tackle that too?
Well, I think it's very interesting that we always look at symptoms and trying to find solutions for symptoms. If we have a headache, it's much easier to take an Advil or a Tylenol or something with codeine so that it can knock us off and then we forget about it or it goes away, rather than looking to why do we have a headache. Doctors operate that way because it keeps them in business. Governments operate that way because it keeps them in business. So to look at how we can stop insurgency is looking at the symptoms. But if we look at why do we have insurgency, and then only then we can possibly come up with a solution. But that's a difficult way. But unless we do the difficult things in life, I don't think that we're going to succeed in this life. And we've already created a Jurassic Park. And Jurassic Park is, you know what happens at the end. So I think it's a decision that has to be taken not only by the governments, but by the people. That we really have to look at why things are happening in the world. Why are we in Afghanistan? Why is this insurgency? Afghans are not the target. I'm totally safe. The targets are internationals, and mostly Americans. Do American people stop and think, why are we the target?
Well, some do, and then their answer, of course, is that the answer is to go home, and then we won't be the target.
And then they continue to be the target.
Yeah, they will.
No matter where they fight this war, America will fight this war. If they don't fight it in Afghanistan, they're going to fight it in Somalia. Or somewhere else. Or at home, God knows. But I think it's really time to ask these very difficult questions and not really asking the questions, but really doing something about it.
I really appreciate having the opportunity to speak to you and to ask this question. My name is Jennifer, and I'm in the Air Force, and I've been deployed to Afghanistan several times as a helicopter pilot. And I have picked up several people and Afghan nationals and done the medevac and all the trying to win the hearts and minds. And I was involved in a lot of, I guess, incidents where Taliban were targeting schools specifically. And it was very sad because they were successful. And I just wondered, I saw the country and where you have your schools now. And as you start to expand, if you have a plan for expanding south, where a lot of the stronghold is with the Taliban, do you fear at all for your security, especially with the incident of the young lady that he referenced a second ago in the Swat Valley there in Pakistan? Do you have, and you said, you referenced that it was more of the Americans that the Taliban are trying to target. But as you get US aid and aid from our allies, do you fear that at all? And do you have any kind of plan to really beef up security, I guess, is my question?
We're working mostly wherever we can work. So there are parts of the South where there are no schools open for boys or girls. And we have no intention of going there. There are parts in the South where we might be able to work, but I'm not going to go there. No, not myself. what happens is that there are other organizations that are already based in those areas. So most likely we will partner with them. Other than that, we will work wherever it's possible to work. So of course, I mean, it is a worry, yeah? I mean, it's a worry for myself, it's a worry for the organization.
You know, I think there are sort of several themes that are coming out here that maybe it's worth just kind of stepping back for a minute to pull them out. One is, we did not go into Afghanistan initially to help Afghans. It's perfectly true. We went in because we were attacked in 9/11. If the Taliban government had given up Osama bin Laden, we would not have invaded.
No.
Having gone into Afghanistan, we went in, of course, without a plan. And I say, of course, because nobody was planning on fighting in Afghanistan. And when you suddenly, for various reasons, find that you're having a war in a place where you've never had a war, you're going to find that you haven't had a lot of pre-planning. And then it's probably not, almost, well, and then you'll have a lot of criticism for not having a plan. Now, there's a second theme which you're bringing out, Hassina, very much, which is, okay, you got there. You realized that you can't just kill terrorists, that if you're going to have anything stable and leave, you have to leave something stable behind. Otherwise, the problem, what you're saying is the problem will come back. We'll either be fighting it someplace else or we'll be fighting back there. That's the point when one has to, well, that was the point, we're a little past it now, where we need to begin listening to people on the ground. But as you've told me in Kabul, what a lot of people want to tell us is how to give them money for projects. There is a more complicated dialogue with a few people on how to build things, and there's a dialogue with a lot of people who want to be given money for projects, some for good projects, some for bad projects. How do the foreigners listen to Afghans in a way that separates out building from just doing a project with somebody different so somebody else gets the money?
Well, first of all, life has become one big project. Everything is a project. And then the project ends because the project always has an end date. So that date comes and then poof, there's nothing there. In fact, in Hosh, where I was there, it was a project of Afghan Aid, which is it's a British organization. They introduced cheese to this community. This community had never had cheese before. They had milk and yogurt and all sorts of things, and they have cows, of course, but they've never made cheese for some reason. So and they like cheese. So, but then the project was ending, so they had no idea how to continue the projects because the person that was running it didn't have money to pay, and the sale from the cheese was not enough to sustain it. So it seems like everything is a project. Nothing in aid money should be more of an investment in a place like Afghanistan rather than a project. Because if they invest in something, then that will be long-lasting and sustainable, and people will continue to work and they will have an income from it. And there are plenty of those type of factories that are dormant that can be reactivated, or other programs that can be done. That's more of an investment to start something so that it will continue. So
how do we figure out which are the good projects and which are the projects?
Which is a good project? I think a good project, I think the aid money should only be focused on infrastructure, health, education, and most of all, environment. Because right now, the air in Kabul is so bad that more people are dying from the air than the war. Breathing is very difficult in Kabul. So the rest of it, Afghans will do it themselves. You know, I think the rest of it, spending billions of dollars on making Afghan women entrepreneurs, is a total waste of money. You know, I think that the Afghans are genetically entrepreneurs. We don't have to. You can't really create entrepreneurs. They know how to make money. There's plenty of money in Afghanistan. In fact, in the way aid money has worked so far, has created dependency, and Afghans became very lazy. So I think if we focus on some main development programs of infrastructure, it's the only way that you really, in the whole world, you can see changes will come about. But when we're wasting money on small things that won't really make a difference, because I don't think that, for example, you cannot bring law enforcement to a country. That's some things that the Afghans have to decide. Millions of dollars being, or even corruption, millions and millions of dollars. We have 3 different offices now fighting corruption. You know, corruption is not something that you can fight this way. You know, only through education and changes that can come about. In fact, aid money has created some corruption.
So thank you both very much for your remarks. Although I think that we'd all obviously share the agreement within the international development community that primary and secondary education are, you know, absolutely essential in terms of development priorities. My, I guess, observation and question come from more of the space of what's come up in this discussion on kind of security issue currently in Afghanistan and the insurgency. We talked a lot about, or you guys discussed how kind of the insurgency arises and these young men that are being radicalized. I think, though, that based on, you know, readings and observations, this sometimes happens because of socioeconomic conditions on the ground, as in lack of education, lack of employment opportunities for them. I'm wondering that if you see as a possibility, whether it's within your own organization or other organizations that are working, the possibility of kind of targeting this demographic of young men with no employment, with no opportunities, and creating more of a technical or vocational training. I agree with you absolutely that education from primary to high school should be a priority and kind of is the long-term answer to development and security issues. But for kind of the short to the medium, do you see something more immediate to satisfy this kind of economic need and this opportunity to create employable, men and women, but especially from the security perspective, this demographic of men that are sometimes targeted to be radicalized?
Thank you. Yes, for sure. You know, I think education for boys will have to be a little different than what we're doing with the girls, because for the girls, it's very crucial to have their high school diploma. And for the boys, it's a huge challenge to keep 18-year-old boys sitting at 4th grade. So I think for the boys, we will probably do it a bit differently so that they can have education up to 9th grade. And then after that, to focus on a vocation that they can have a job and provide them for their families, because they get married very young and they will do anything to just have enough food for the day. So, and there are some technical schools now in Kabul, and also in some of the provinces. But we need to focus on the whole population, and not only for those who can come to school or they can afford it, or so. Yeah.
If I could just add one point, Hassina made a point about infrastructure. And looking now not at the cause of insurgency, but the cause of unemployment, there is a huge infrastructure issue that needs to be dealt with, because there are certain key roadblocks. And as you may know, there's a very large landless population in Afghanistan. It's not all people who have an option to farm. There's a big landless but rural population. And there isn't enough arable land to constantly meet an expanding population growth. There are probably others, but certainly two big bottlenecks are roads and power. Now, full disclosure, that was part of what I reoriented some aid projects for, so I'm not a disinterested witness, but you need at least to be able to get into light agribusiness to absorb labor. But you can't do that unless you have power that is competitive with power prices in Pakistan and Iran. When power in Afghanistan is 6 and 7 times more expensive, Afghanistan will always grow tomatoes and import tomato paste, and grow wheat and import flour, because it will never be able to produce it economically. So there's a need for power. Right now, so much of the power generated is diesel, with imported diesel fuel. That's what makes it so expensive. Same with roads. There are areas in Afghanistan right now, quite apart from the importance of education that Hassina was talking about, where farmers have already converted from opium to various vegetable crops, because they can make actually more money on multiple crops. They can grow several vegetable crops in a year. They can only grow one poppy crop. But that means they have to have enough water, and they have to be where they can move the crop out. Can't move tomatoes. You can move potatoes because they take a lot of bruising. You can't move any perishable vegetable if you're not within some access of a road. So if you don't deal with some of the infrastructure issues, which Hassina identified, I don't know how you would ever create enough employment, whether you educated people or not. You've got to be doing it.
But yeah, because economic development is not only to train entrepreneurs. Economic development and also, well, first of all, this whole market economy has not really been working very well in Afghanistan, because we have taken market economy in a whole other level. Even in the U.S., there are regulations. You cannot bring cotton into U.S. because they have to sell their own. We have no regulations. The market is totally open. So Afghanistan has become a dumping ground for China, Pakistan, Iran, and the rest of it. So we closed down 300 factories in Herat last year because they were producing quality things. This one paint factory was producing quality paint, but couldn't survive because cheap paint was coming from Iran. So unless we have, well, of course, when there's not a leadership that can protect its own people, then it's not going to happen. Energy, of course, is a huge problem, but then it shouldn't be. 10 years, billions of dollars spent. We have sun and we have wind. The two things that Afghanistan have a lot of. Sun, wind, and water, in fact. The water management has not happened yet. We have plenty of water. Pakistan is taking some of the water. Iran is taking the rest of the water. The report was, the study was done, report was published. They refused to publish the report because Pakistan didn't want it and Iran didn't want it. So most of the water goes to Iran and Pakistan, and we don't have water and we don't have electricity. But yet we have a lot of water in Afghanistan. We have rivers that is always full of water. And then especially in Badakhshan province, where there's just two huge rivers come together and they don't have electricity in the city.
Hi, my name is Nasiba Mehmankulova. I work for URC. We do have a project in Afghanistan as well. My question is to Mr. Ambassador as well. It took U.S. like 10 years we worked there, but questions of sustainability and country ownership, it is coming something new. It's also USAID is really catching up breath, and it is focusing on those things. And do you think and most of the time in Afghanistan is like by Afghanis, so U.S. troops are the ones that are seen, and that could be one of the reasons why it's difficult to win the heart of the Afghanistani people. Do you think U.S. would it be safe to do continued development without the U.S. troops, and would it still continue that kind of work, and would it open up, like maybe by Afghani people, would it open up some time or some opportunity to win some hearts and minds?
I think Hassina may want to comment too, but I believe there will be areas where it will continue to be possible to work, just as it is now. Areas where Hassina has schools are evidence of areas where you can continue to work. There'll be a lot. I think personally we ought to be doing more in the parts of the country where we can work easily, instead of putting so much of our money into the areas where it's the hardest to work and where we probably achieve the least over the long term. So I'm sure that we can continue to work. I think in terms of hearts and minds, the first thing you have to do is be able to keep people alive. If you can't protect them, it's very difficult to do anything else to attract their allegiance. Or somebody has to protect them. You can't build loyalty if you can't produce minimal protection for people. But this is some mission that is shifting to the Afghans. I don't think it's not going to be a continued American mission to provide security. Whether we've provided it is also another question. Do you want to comment on that, or go on to the next one?
Well, this winning hearts and minds always kind of the whole when this whole term was developed, I was
you weren't
puzzled.
Born when that term was developed. This was Vietnam.
Winning hearts and minds.
This is my first.
I think again we need to think about, why did we lose it? What are we winning? Why wasn't it there? Why are we winning it? I think as far as security, if we can provide the very basics for Afghans, which is health and education and energy and a clean air to breathe and work so they can have food at the table, they will protect their own country. I will have no doubt that they will make sure that there will be no Taliban. We had a school in Wardak province. It's no longer there because it was attacked, and then the village asked us not to reopen it. But the principal of the school, he sat on the roof of the building every night. If it wasn't for him, the whole village would have been burned down, because he was sitting every night on top of the building with his gun. So when he first heard the very first explosion, he started shooting, and they ran away, and they didn't have time to, because they placed bombs on all four corners of the building. And the building was inside the village. So they ran away, and we saved the school. I believe that if we can provide people with the very basic needs, and they know that they're going to have not only security, but a life that's better than what they've had in the last 30, 40 years, they will protect the country themselves. I don't think that we really need to even worry about having a very strong military.
My question is regarding the youth of Afghanistan. I'm curious to know how they feel about the power of their voice, and whether it's silenced, and if there is a sense of hope instilled and for a better future, even with their current restraints.
Well, the good news is that they're very active, first of all. There are various different youth groups and councils and all sorts of things, and they come together and they talk, and they're very involved. and many other organizations are also working with the youth. And it doesn't mean it's enough. I think we need to do more. But the good thing is that they do feel like they do have a voice, and it will make a difference. So, yeah, they're very active.
I must say, every time I go back, it is the youth who give me the greatest optimism that Afghanistan can have a real future. And they're in many ways, the most impressive part of the country. And there is a change, and Hassina's helped me to see it in introducing me to people, but there's a desire for a different future that isn't the future of warlords and that isn't just about power. It's one of the things that does, on bad days, lift me up a bit, although I'm no longer responsible for Afghan politics or our politics. But it is a very complicated subject. I mean, the country, the war. If this discussion has done nothing else, it should raise your confusion to a higher level of detail. And I thank you all for coming. I know we've run out of time. I know there were still questions that people wanted to ask. I believe, Heidi, we've got some reception outside that we encourage. She encourages you. I'm just a mouthpiece. To join us afterwards. So thank you all, and thank you.
Can I just say one more thing, because I'm very happy to see a lot of very young people here, and I'm very interested in speaking at high schools and getting the younger generation here involved in our programs, in fact, in various different ways, however they're interested, in colleges also. I used to have an office at American University. That's where I was in 2000 before I left. So if that is something that people are interested, I will be very happy to talk to you, and you can contact me directly. I did speak to some high schools last year in Los Angeles and Seattle, and they're very much involved now, and they have now been going to other classroom, educating other kids about Afghanistan, and letting them know what Afghanistan is not a desert and it's not a war. There's much more going on there. So, and I think that's really the only way that we will eventually bring changes anyway. So we can have video conferencing where there is a facility in Kabul. I can use the American University facility, and if people come together, we can have a video conference where you can actually see some of our students, be in touch with them, and all sorts of things.
Thank you. I think the last thing is for everybody to thank Hassina for coming.
Thank you for joining us for World Affairs Today, a production of the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. Stay connected with us at www.worldaffairstoday.org.